Okay, so my thoughts are at this moment is to just, indicate areas a bit more, try to put a little more description and soften other areas. So I'm going to go now into the corners of the painting, essentially. Any area that's outside of our main center of interest. If you think of the way we look at things, our eye is an oval. We tend to see in an oval type of shape. So edges outside of this oval that might be kind of imaginarily placed here in the painting will be much softer, more abstracted. So this is a very hard edge here in contrast to that. So let's soften that up and just see if it doesn't move our eye to the area we want it to. And the paint's a little wet here. This may be something I do towards the end of this, let the paint set up a little bit and kind of finesse the edges. But I just wanted to show you here, wet on wet, how we can kind of soften edges a bit. Okay, just trying to mix a color that will kind of help this area out, color and value, cooling it down, because typically you'll see a little blue light where the sky meets the edges of the tree shapes. Okay, that's feeling a little better now. My eye's not attracted to that point as much as it was, so that's moving the eye towards this area a bit more, which is nice. Another way to grab the attention in an area is to create a nice, strong, hard line. I'm going to take a little bit of this warmer yellow paint and indicate the grass that would fall right about here. So I'm trying to create a hard edge that falls close to the center of interest. I'm going to create another hard edge right back here. There we go. And as the eye moves away from that area, those edges can become lost, more soft-edged. So now you see okay, as I step back, I'm looking at this pathway that is leading me up. It's meandering up, catching this edge and going into the sky. This is the biggest opening of the sky. We're always drawn to the largest opening shape in amongst trees, so it helps to guide the eye through the landscape and beyond. So I want to continue that kind of linear journey with this painting, and yet describe other areas that will help to kind of echo that and complement that visual journey. So as I squint down, I'm going to add a little more yellow. It's a bright note of color and a hard edge, so that always seems to do the trick to attract the eye to a certain spot in the painting. And then as you go further away from that spot, it should, the chroma of the color can soften and diminish, and the edge quality can soften up as well, so your eye's not drawn away from that area. Can we get back into the viridian green with a little bit of yellow? to bring the foreground green into kind of a higher chroma. So that helped move the eye forward. While doing that, I want the chroma not to distract from the focal area. Now the marks, the mark making as I get towards the edges of the painting, I like to think of them as almost pointers. You know, the marks will lead the viewer into the painting as well. So some directional marks help guide the eye in towards the painting. Okay, I want to soften this up a bit. Change the shape a little. There we go. Okay, so now what I want to do is come in here and describe a few of the trunks of the trees. And probably just around the focal point, just to give a sense that there is some sort of trunk there that's visible. Don't want it to stand out too much, but just to suggest that it's there. So I'm going to try to keep my color somewhat muted and the value somewhat darker. And when you think of a trunk of something, it's, you know, in nature, it's never really super straight. It's also kind of a lost and found edge because you're seeing it between the leaves. And sometimes it's good to go back in and kind of overlap some of that shape just to suggest that there's some leaves in front of it. Okay, back to the lupin. We're going to start to describe a little bit of the lupin that are in the foreground, right around the center of interest as well, just so we can get the eye to feel like it's focusing in on an area. And start adding bits of blue to create that sense of atmosphere. Play with edges again. There was a nice little shadow shape there on this edge that I want to indicate. Get some arms around the base of these trees. Just restate some of those to bring the eye towards that area. Little warmth in the shadows never hurt. Now you've got that mix of the cool skylight mixing with the nice warm reflected light. I'm going to switch to another brush and get back to stating some of the lupin here. These beautiful wildflowers. It was fun to see this site, to be at this location as they were in full bloom, and it was a very inspiring day to spend trying to capture some of the colors that were around here. Okay, I want to increase the chroma of the lupin right around the shadow area. So I'm going to go in with a few kind of more intense colors. That always helps to draw the eye. If you sense a bit more intensity of color around the focal point, that helps to visually get you to that place. I'm trying to connect some of the little pieces of growth of the lupin. They seem to come off a stem, and they grow in these little piles of tiny flowers. So I want to just indicate a few of the idea that there's little stems there. You know, maybe a few that have lost the flowers. We're going to add some notes of mid-value to the lupin. And just a few notes here and there. Now let's go in and I want to indicate a bit of the highlight on this one tree that's in the center of the painting, just to kind of bring that forward. I'm laying in a warm note to catch that warm light on this pine tree. Just want to describe the idea of light hitting the edge of this pine tree. It's a smaller tree amongst the larger ones. So I also want to be very conscious of the variety of the shapes and not get too much repetition. So coming back to this piece, I had an opportunity to kind of step back. It's always good to do that. Step back, take a look at the painting. Better yet, if you can step back and take a look at it and, by looking in a mirror and see the reverse image, it really points out some of the things that might want to be addressed. As I step back, I noticed there was a few spots of dark that were kind of attracting the attention, so I want to go and kind of make them less obvious. So I noticed there was this dark here that is sort of grabbing a little of attention, so I just want to soften that up a bit. The shapes here in the tree, as I step back, they seem very similar in size and shape, so I want to address that. So it always goes back to, think of the focal point, think of the variety of the shapes to create visual interest, and what is grabbing our attention away from that center of interest. And now is the opportunity to kind of fine-tune by subduing areas and bringing areas forward. So the next few moments will be spent doing that very thing, trying to get it to a somewhat of a resolution for the day. I always like to, in the studio, I like to kind of get it to a point where I think it's fairly finished, and then, stop and take a look at it the next day, with a fresh eye. And kind of, I'll be looking at the same things. Are there areas that are detracting from the center of interest? And if I can resolve those, now it saves me steps tomorrow. But I always think I kind of think of this period when we step back and let it kind of marinate, let it stew, as an important part of the creative process in the studio. We want to come back to it with fresh eyes and then just address those subtleties that will make it a stronger piece. Okay, so another thing I want to address is I want to put a nice dark value right in here, probably the strongest, darkest value. So we have to start with a really clean brush, clean area of the palette to work in, and I want to have a nice warm dark. So I'm going to mix a little bit of this alizarin crimson with burnt sienna, a little bit of ultramarine blue, dilute it. It's a nice warm dark, and I just want to highlight some of these edges here, soften some of this. A nice strong dark right there would be a nice touch. A few dark spots right around the focal point. A few notes of cool color to amplify that change of shadow. This comes up a lot. When do we know a painting's finished? Well, it's hard to really pinpoint exactly if it's finished or not. I liken it to having a conversation. There's a point when you've said enough and there's no reason to continue it, right? It just comes to a natural conclusion on its own. So if the painting starts feeling like I don't know what else to say, it's a good clue to say, let me stop and let it rest. There might be more to say tomorrow. And one of the more powerful ways of self-critiquing is to get back to the idea of the variety of shapes, the values, the edges. So very important to establish that center of interest in the lines that lead to it and what the edges are doing to contribute to that center of interest. All above the various color, are there colors that are distracting from that? So it gives us something to ask about and then something to go and address. Are the values not in the right place for the value planes?